Hi all, I'm Carrie and welcome to my channel. You might hear some purring as I give this intro here. This is Rascal. This dress started out as a Gunne Sax Cottagecore stash busting experiment and ended up as a comfy Hobbit cosplay. And perfect timing too. Can you believe it has been almost 20 years since the release of The Fellowship of the Ring? I remember desperately needing a strong dose of fantasy and escapism 3 months after 9/11 and when I wasn't trying to work on my first master's degree or listen obsessively to NPR, I was rereading Tolkien's work in preparation for watching the movie. Like many, I was enthralled by the idyllic world of the Hobbits and felt a kinship with them in their short stature, gardening prowess, love of good, healthy food, and
mushrooms!
And reluctantly dealing with larger forces in the world. I could play the Shire scenes on a loop. They are so soothing and cheerful, and are clearly an earlier version of the cottagecore aesthetic, harkening back to an idyllic past that existed only in fantasy. Like Hobbits, I always pack snacks and I'm thinking about my next meal.
What about breakfast?
We've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast?
And I'm usually a homebody unless I'm going on a really big adventure. The book was published in 1954 when sexism and misogyny went relatively unquestioned, and gender representation in books was not what one would call diverse. Peter Jackson played with some female characters to make them more powerful, like Arwen, and of course Galadriel rocks, but the female hobbits are merely decoration in the novel and the film. Why can't girl hobbits partake in unexpected adventures and quests, running around with wizards, dwarves, and elves? This frustrates me so much that I imagine Merry and Pippin as non-binary, and sometimes even girls, when I reread the novels or rewatch the film. Feminine hobbit clothes clearly don't deter them from being quite active, and I think they could easily hike past the boundaries of the Shire if given enough incentive. For example,
I want to see mountains again. Mountains, Gandalf!
These costumes look like a mishmash of medieval, Renaissance, and dirndls, and would be perfect for a Ren fair, where fantasy costumes and hobbits would be perfectly welcome and even expected. And that's exactly where I plan to wear my hobbity dress in the future. But as usual, my path to this costume was meandering and full of indecision. I started out with a rough sketch and a selection of 2 and 3 yard lengths of fabric in my stash that I wanted to use up. Dark green velvet, a stained glass printed cotton, and a floral printed cotton. Gunne Sax dresses of the 1970s and 80s often had multiple prints, so I squinted it at lots of pictures to come up with my design. A false corset bodice with a tiered skirt and puffy sleeves, and an invisible zipper up the back for ease in getting dressed. I chose Simplicity 3723 for the bodice. Instead of making a mock-up with a pattern size as is, this time I'm going to do something a little bit different. I am going to basically trace the pattern and make adjustments as I'm tracing in order to get a pattern piece that is more to my own dimensions and to get rid of some of that ease that is always in these commercial patterns, but ironically that you don't really see on the models on the front of the envelope of the pattern pieces. Okay, here are my pattern pieces 1 and 2, bodice front, bodice back, and they are on tracing paper. I just have 8.5 by 11 pieces of tracing paper. I bought a pad of it a long time ago for a geology class, and so I just taped them together and traced the pattern from the pattern tissue, but instead of actually having to, cut out that tissue and then make a mock-up and then realize, no, it doesn't fit at all. I've got my handy dandy little remeasured pattern pieces to make that mock-up, and hopefully it'll fit a lot better. Oh, and I forgot to say that I just cut these out in order to make it easier to trace the dart lines in chalk on the wrong side of my fabric. You can see that over here and over here. But I keep the little pieces so that I know what kind of a edge to make. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Like if you make a really severe one, you can just trim it off later if it's not right. Here's my sewn and serged green velvet bodice, and it already needs a lint roller. I decided the neckline looked a bit plain, so I made some piping and used that instead of a facing. I then used a leafy decorative stitch on my brother's sewing machine to keep the piping in place. I was originally going to put the false corset lacing at the center front, but I wanted to cover up the darts, so I folded some pieces of the darker cotton, and here I am experimenting with placement. Looks a bit like suspenders, but I was hoping that would be fixed by the faux lacing. To turn the trim into lacing strips, I used an awl to make holes, then put in tiny grommets. I messed up 3 of them before I remembered how to do it correctly, but now I have lacing holes. I pinned the lacing strips on the bodice, then stitched on the outside edges, then on the inside edges, stopping before the top grommet so that I could actually lace them. It's not quite what I envisioned at first, but good enough for an experimental dress. I hemmed and hawed over sleeves and ended up going with View A of Simplicity S8695 because they are reminiscent of some Gunne Sax gown sleeves, and they're puffed.
Marilla, look at the puffs.
They're ridiculous. You'll have to turn sideways to get through the doors.
And after I attached them to the dress, I started to feel like I actually had something I'd enjoy wearing when it was finished. My skirt panels are cut in the 18th century manner in that they are rectangles cut selvage to selvage and sewn together at the selvages. The top tier of the skirt is 2 lengths of 42-inch wide printed cotton, 20 inches in skirt length top to bottom. I appreciate that this fabric was easy to cut along the stained glass pattern. I gathered the skirt along a V-shaped path chalked onto the skirt front to accommodate the shape of the bodice, but then I remembered pockets. So here I am seam ripping the skirt to create holes for my hobbity pocketses. You know, to put rocks, mushrooms, and other essentials in. It was quite awkward sewing these to the skirt panels, but pockets are crucial. After sewing the skirt to the bodice, I tackled the invisible zipper. It worked, but the bulk at the waist seam makes it difficult to zip and unzip.
You shall not pass!
And I have a feeling I'm going to end up breaking the zipper. If that happens, I'm replacing it with a regular old visible zip. The second skirt tier consists of 3 panels of my 42-inch wide floral fabric that is 7.5 inches long, sewn at the selvages and serged along the long raw edges. Emma is frustrated the dress is not yet long enough to hide under when it is on my dress form. The last skirt tier is 4 panels of the darker cotton, 7 inches long, sewn at the selvages, serged, and gathered at the top long edge, and hemmed at the bottom before I used the halving method to pin it to the second skirt tier. I felt confident in hemming the last tier before attaching it because the skirt is all on the straight of grain and should remain even. Anyway, after sewing the last tier on, I took pictures of the dress on the dress form and sent them to some friends, puzzled over what I had just made exactly, until several separate friends said, Hobbit dress. Thank you, friends, because yes, it immediately clicked and the world made sense again. I tried on the dress with my ridiculous Boogie Babe wig from Amazon because all hobbits seem to have curly hair, and decided something was missing, so I made a dried flower crown like the one I got at a Ren fair when I was a teenager. It was pretty simple after watching a YouTube tutorial that I will link in the description box below. You need dried flowers or grasses or other planty things, 20 gauge wire, 22 gauge wire for individual or clumps of dried planty things, floral tape, and ribbon plus wire cutters and pliers or very strong fingers. Then it was time to test out this Hobbit dress in the woods on a beautiful fall day with my husband, my favorite photographer and videographer. I would say this is a great adventure dress. Even though I'm wearing cute boots with very little traction, I can walk, hike, kick, twirl, and the pockets are great for hiding rings of great power or whatever. Sorry, I'm not going barefoot and I don't have hobbit feet prosthetics. Who says girl hobbits can't also be wizards? Come with me to my favorite rock outcrop nearby. I'm hopping from the point bar side of a tiny meandering stream where material gets deposited to the cut bank side where erosion occurs. This is the Inglefield Sandstone, Pennsylvanian in age, over 300 million years old, or older than the dinosaurs. It was deposited when the Midwestern US straddled the equator. It has amazing crossbedding and does contain some petrified wood. I love coming here to feel the ancient sand, look through rocks in the point bar, and ponder ages past, both in geologic time and on Middle Earth. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and let me know if you've made a Lord of the Rings cosplay or plan to. I hope to see you next time. Bye. Oh, who's a fuzzy muffin? Who's a fuzzy muffin?